I was drowning in silk and cashmere when the wardrobe door swung open, flooding Eric DeLuca's private closet with the cold LED light from his executive office, and I pressed my tear-stained face harder against a charcoal Brioni suit that probably cost more than my entire year's salary, desperately trying to muffle the pathetic sounds escaping my throat before he discovered me falling apart like this, broken, cornered, terrified, when I was supposed to be his unshakable secretary, the woman who never flinched at blood money transactions or midnight disposal calls. The man who filled the doorway wasn't just my boss, he was the most feared Mafia don on the eastern seaboard, Eric DeLuca, whose neck tattoos disappeared beneath the open collar of his black dress shirt, whose gold chains caught the light like warning signals, whose 6 feet 3 inches frame made the already small space shrink to suffocating dimensions as he stood there holding his phone in one hand, the other hovering near the gun I knew he always carried at his hip, his dark eyes scanning the wardrobe with lethal precision before they locked onto me with an intensity that made my already racing heart stutter and stop. Linda. The way my name left his mouth, low, commanding, edged with something dangerous I'd never heard before, cracked something wide open inside my chest, because in 3 years of preparing his espresso at exactly 6:47 a.m., of screening calls from politicians and criminals alike, of pretending I didn't notice when he returned to the office with blood on his cuffs or bodies being dragged through the underground garage, I had never once heard Eric DeLuca's voice soften with anything resembling concern. He stepped into the wardrobe, and suddenly there was no oxygen left, just expensive fabric and his overwhelming presence, tattoos mapping violence across his throat and hands, designer suit stretched over shoulders built for breaking bones, that intoxicating scent of bergamot and gunpowder that had haunted my dreams for months, and I watched through blurred vision as his expression shifted from cold alertness to something far more terrifying, possessive fury mixed with genuine worry. His hand reached out, and I should have flinched. This was a man who reportedly killed 3 rival captains in one night, who owned judges and senators, whose temper was legendary enough that grown men crossed themselves when his name was mentioned, but instead I held perfectly still as his tattooed fingers gripped my chin with surprising gentleness, tilting my face up until I had no choice but to meet those dark, storm-filled eyes that seemed to see straight through every professional wall I'd ever built. Who made you cry? His voice dropped to a lethal whisper that probably preceded violence in 1,000 different scenarios. And how do you want me to dispose of them? The question should have reminded me exactly what kind of monster I worked for, what kind of darkness lived behind those 3-piece suits and cold calculations, but instead something desperate and warm unfurled in my stomach, because for the first time in my entire life, someone was offering to eliminate my problems with the kind of permanent efficiency that only a man like Eric DeLuca could provide. It's nothing you need to concern yourself with, Mr. DeLuca, I managed, even though my voice cracked halfway through and fresh tears spilled hot and humiliating down my cheeks. It's personal. My problem to handle. I apologize for breaking down during work hours, it was completely unprofessional and it won't happen again. His jaw clenched, and I watched his free hand curl into a fist at his side, knuckles white with restraint, as if he was physically stopping himself from hunting down whoever caused my tears. Linda Verga. He said my full name slowly, deliberately, the way he pronounced sentences on men who'd crossed him. In 3 years, you have never once been late. Never filed anything incorrectly. Never flinched when blood walked through our doors. Never showed me anything but perfect composure, even when lesser people ran screaming. He crouched then, this powerful, dangerous man lowering himself until we were eye to eye, and the movement was so unexpected, so unlike the commanding Don who never made himself vulnerable for anyone, that my breath caught completely in my throat. So when I find you hiding in my closet, crying like your world is ending, it becomes my problem whether you want it to be or not. His thumb brushed my jawline with devastating gentleness. Because you are mine to protect. Do you understand? The possessiveness in his tone should have sent every warning bell in my head screaming, should have reminded me this was a man who owned people and territories and entire city blocks, who didn't understand boundaries because he'd never needed to respect them, but instead, I felt the dam inside me break completely. My brother, I choked out, the words tumbling from my lips before I could stop them, before I could remember all the reasons why dragging Eric DeLuca into my messy, impossible disaster of a personal life was the worst decision I could make. Mateo. He's only 22, and the Serranos have him because they want your financial ledgers, the ones that could destroy your entire operation. They gave me 72 hours to steal them, or they'll send him back to me in pieces. I watched his expression transform from concern to something absolutely murderous, his features hardening into a mask of cold fury that made my blood run hot and cold simultaneously, and his grip on my chin tightened, not enough to hurt, but enough to anchor me to him, to this moment, to the irrevocable decision I just made by speaking those words aloud. How long have they had him? He asked, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper that probably preceded executions in dark warehouses. Comment below where you're watching from, your city, state, or country. Let me know if you think Eric can save Mateo before the 72 hours run out, ***. Sunday, I whispered, and watched Eric's expression darken like a storm rolling over Chicago's skyline. They took him Sunday afternoon. Outside his apartment. 3 men in a black SUV, no plates, no witnesses except a neighbor who was too terrified to give police anything useful. Eric's thumb traced my jawline, a gesture so gentle it contradicted everything about the deadly stillness that had overtaken his body, and I could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from asphalt in summer, dangerous and suffocating. 72 hours from Sunday. His voice was arctic. That's today, Linda. You have until tonight. I know. Fresh tears burned down my cheeks. I convinced myself that if I quit, if I disappeared from your organization, they'd lose their leverage. That they'd let Mateo go because I'd be worthless to them without access to your files. Something flickered across Eric's face, an emotion too complex to name, before his features hardened into the mask I'd seen him wear during territory negotiations, when men's lives were decided with a single word. You thought removing yourself from my employment would save your brother. He said it like he was testing the weight of the statement, finding it fundamentally flawed. You thought the Serranos would just let you walk away after they'd already made their move. I had to try something. The words burst out of me, desperate and raw. I couldn't steal from you, Eric. I wouldn't. But I couldn't let them kill Mateo either, and I didn't know what else to do except remove myself from the equation entirely. By hiding in my closet at dawn, trying to leave your badge like a coward. His words should have stung, but there was no cruelty in them, only a dark, possessive anger that wasn't directed at me. How long, Linda? What? How long did you think you could hide this from me? His hand moved from my chin to cup the back of my neck, his tattooed fingers tangling in my hair with enough pressure to keep me anchored to him, to this moment. Your hands have been shaking for 3 days. You've stayed late every night this week, but I checked, you weren't working. You were just sitting at your desk, staring at nothing. You've barely eaten. You jump every time your phone buzzes. And yesterday, when I walked past your desk, you looked at me like you were memorizing my face. My breath caught. You noticed all that? I notice everything about you, Linda. The confession was delivered in that same deadly soft tone, and the implications crashed over me like cold water. I've been watching you unravel for 3 days, waiting for you to trust me enough to tell me what was wrong. I had my suspicions, debt, maybe, or an abusive ex, but the Serranos. His jaw clenched hard enough that I could see the muscle jump. That's a whole different level of threat. Before I could process what he'd just admitted, that he'd been watching me, noticing details that no boss should notice about his secretary, Eric released me and stood in one fluid movement, pulling his phone from his pocket with the kind of controlled urgency that spoke to years of crisis management. Wait, what are you doing? Panic clawed up my throat as I scrambled to my feet, nearly tripping over my own heels in the cramped wardrobe space. Eric, you can't. If you involve your organization, they'll know I told you, and they'll kill him immediately. Luca, Eric said into the phone, completely ignoring my protests. I need everything we have on the Serranos' current operations. Safe houses, known associates, recent movements. I need locations, surveillance, and I need it within the hour. He paused, listening, his dark eyes never leaving my face. Because they took something that belongs to me, and I'm going to remind them what happens when someone forgets their place. Eric, please, I reached for his arm, my fingers wrapping around his wrist desperately. Please, you're going to make it worse. The Serranos will panic if they think you know, and Matteo. He ended the call and turned to face me fully, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch, not with fear, but with the sudden, overwhelming realization that Eric DeLuca wasn't just angry about the threat to my brother. He was furious that someone had dared to touch anything connected to him. Let me explain something to you, Linda. He stepped closer, backing me against the wall of suits, his presence overwhelming in the small space. The Serranos made their move against you, my secretary, my employee, someone who sits outside my office and knows my schedule and has access to my private spaces, because they wanted to send me a message. They wanted to prove they could get close to me by using you. I'm just. You're not just anything. His hand came up to brace against the wall beside my head, caging me in. You think I don't know what you are to this organization? What you are to me? You've been the one constant in my life for 3 years, Linda. The only person I trust to handle my business, my schedule, my secrets. The only person who's never asked for more than I was willing to give, never flinched from the darkness, never looked at me like I was a monster. His voice dropped lower, more intimate. The only person who makes me want to be something other than the monster everyone else sees. The confession hung between us like a loaded gun, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything except stare at him while my heart tried to beat its way out of my chest. So when the Serranos took your brother to force you to betray me, Eric continued, his free hand coming up to trace the tears still wet on my cheek, they didn't just threaten an employee. They threatened what's mine. And they escalated first. But Matteo will be home by morning. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I promise you that, Linda. Whatever it takes, however much it costs, your brother will be safe. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly it physically hurt, but I'd seen what happened when Mafia families went to war, had filed the casualty reports and the property damage assessments and the obituaries of men who'd gotten caught in the crossfire. What if you can't find him in time? My voice broke. What if they've moved him somewhere you can't reach, or what if they? Then I'll give them exactly what they want. Eric's answer was immediate, unflinching. The ledgers, the accounts, every piece of information that could destroy me. I'll hand it over personally if that's what it takes to get your brother back alive. The statement hit me like a physical blow. You can't, Eric, those ledgers are everything. Every transaction, every illegal deal, every politician you've bribed, every piece of evidence that could send me to prison for the rest of my life, yes. He said it like it was nothing, like 3 years of carefully maintained financial records that could topple his entire empire were inconsequential compared to, but you think I care about that more than I care about keeping you whole? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to examine, wasn't ready to believe, because Eric DeLuca didn't do softness or sentiment or sacrifices for anyone. Except apparently, he did. For me. The realization crashed over me in waves, 3 years of professional distance that had never quite felt professional, of lingering glances across his office, of his hand brushing mine when passing documents, of late nights when he'd find excuses to keep me working just to have me nearby, of the way he always positioned himself between me and potential threats during meetings, of how he'd personally installed a security escort for me after a rival family had been spotted near the building. You've been protecting me. The words escaped before I could stop them. All this time, you've been. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, cutting off whatever confession was about to spill from my lips, and Eric's expression shifted instantly from possessive tenderness to lethal alertness. "Check it," he ordered, his voice hard. "But don't respond." My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, the screen lighting up with a message from an unknown number, and my stomach dropped through the floor when I saw what it was. A video file. "Eric," my voice was barely a whisper. "Play it." He moved behind me, one hand settling on my hip while the other guided my thumb to the play button, his body a solid wall of warmth and protection at my back. The video started, and the first thing I heard was Mateo's voice, rough, frightened, trying desperately to sound brave, before the camera focused on him tied to a metal chair in what looked like an empty warehouse, his face bruised and swollen, dried blood crusting his split lip. "Linda," he swallowed hard, wincing like even that hurt. "Linda, if you're watching this, I need you to listen to me. Don't tell anyone. Don't go to the police. Don't," his voice cracked. "Don't tell Eric DeLuca. Whatever they want, just give it to them. Don't try to fight this. Don't try to save me if it means crossing them, because I can't. I won't be responsible for what happens to you." A hand appeared in frame, tattooed, wearing rings, and backhanded Mateo hard enough that his head snapped to the side, blood spraying from his mouth. I made a sound I didn't recognize, something animal and broken, and Eric's grip on my hip tightened to the point of pain, anchoring me as the video continued. "Tick-tock, Miss Verga." A man's voice, accented and amused. 36 hours left. The ledgers, or your brother's fingers start arriving in the mail. 1 per hour until you deliver. The screen went black. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process the image of my baby brother, the kid who'd just graduated college, who wanted to be a teacher, who'd never hurt anyone in his entire life, beaten and terrified and begging me not to fight back. "Linda." Eric's voice was closer now, his lips against my ear. "Look at me." I couldn't. If I looked at him, I'd completely fall apart, and I couldn't afford to fall apart, not when Mateo needed me to be strong, to be smart, to. Linda, his hand came up to my chin, forcing my face to turn until I had no choice but to meet those dark, furious eyes. "I'm going to ask you one question, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you trust me? Did I trust him? Did I trust Eric DeLuca, Mafia Don, killer, criminal, the man who'd built an empire on violence and fear and ruthless calculation?" I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw 3 years of protection I'd been too afraid to acknowledge, of care disguised as professional courtesy, of a man who just offered to destroy himself to save my brother. "Yes," I whispered. "God help me, yes." "Good." His thumb brushed my lips, a gesture so intimate it made my breath catch. "Then trust me when I say the Serranos just made the worst mistake of their miserable lives. Because now it's not just business." The promise in his voice was absolute, terrifying, and somehow exactly what I needed to hear. "Now it's personal." Luca arrived within 40 minutes, which should have been impossible given morning traffic, but apparently when Eric DeLuca said he needed something immediately, the laws of physics bent to accommodate him. I watched from Eric's private office as his underboss spread surveillance photos across the mahogany desk, grainy images of warehouses, apartment buildings, what looked like a meat packing plant on the south side, while rattling off locations in rapid-fire Italian that Eric answered in the same language, his voice clipped and dangerous. "English, please," I interrupted, my hands twisted together so tightly my knuckles had gone white. "I need to know what's happening." Both men looked at me, Luca with barely concealed surprise that I'd dared to speak, Eric with something that might have been approval, before Eric switched languages mid-sentence. 3 possible locations where the Serranos have been operating this week. Luca's sending teams to each one now. He pointed to the meat packing plant photo. "This one's most likely. Isolated, soundproof, owned by a shell company that traces back to Rafael Serrano's cousin. Hope flared painfully in my chest. So you can get him out. We'll know within the hour. Luca's phone buzzed, and he stepped away to take the call, his voice dropping to a murmur. I turned to Eric, trying to read his expression and failing because he'd slipped into what I privately thought of as his Don mask, the cold, calculating version of himself that made board rooms go silent and rival families reconsider their life choices. Eric, I need you to understand something. I forced my voice steady even though everything inside me was screaming. If this goes wrong, if the Serranos panic and hurt Mateo because you came after them too aggressively, then you'll blame me. He said it matter-of-factly, like he'd already accepted that possibility and decided to live with it. You'll hate me for the rest of your life, and I'll deserve it. But he'll be alive to hate me for, which is more important. That's not, I'm trying to say that maybe we should consider their terms. Give them what they want before. No. The word was absolute, final. We don't negotiate with the Serranos. Not now. Not ever. Even if it means Mateo dies. The question came out sharper than I intended, edged with 3 days of terror and exhaustion. Eric crossed the space between us in 2 strides, his hands coming up to frame my face with a gentleness that contradicted the steel in his voice. Especially then. Because if I give them the ledgers, they'll kill your brother anyway to tie up loose ends. The only thing keeping Mateo alive right now is their belief that you'll deliver. The moment they have what they want, he becomes a liability. The logic was sound, ruthless, and absolutely terrifying because it meant there was no safe path forward, only dangerous ones. I can't lose him, Eric. My voice broke. He's all I have left. You have me. The statement was delivered with such casual certainty that it took a moment to register. You've had me for 3 years, Linda, whether you realized it or not. Before I could process what that meant, Luca returned, his expression grim. The meat packing plant is empty. Cleaned out recently, there's evidence someone was held there, but they moved him. Same story at the other 2 locations. The Serranos are staying mobile. Eric's jaw clenched, but his hands remained gentle on my face. Keep searching. Expand the radius. Check every property within 50 miles that has any connection to their organization. Boss, that's going to take. Then you'd better work fast. The threat in Eric's voice made Luca nod sharply and leave without another word. The moment we were alone, I pulled away from Eric's touch, needing space to think, to breathe, to not feel the overwhelming pull of his presence when my entire world was falling apart. This is my fault. The words tasted like ash. If I'd just stolen the ledgers like they wanted, if I betrayed you instead of trying to run, Mateo would already be dead. Eric's blunt assessment cut through my spiral. You would have given them everything, and they would have killed him anyway because that's what the Serranos do. They don't leave witnesses, Linda. They don't honor deals. The only reason your brother is still breathing is because they need you cooperative and terrified. How can you be so sure? Because I've been at war with Rafael Serrano for 5 years. Eric moved to the window overlooking the city, his hands sliding into his pockets. Ever since his family tried to move into my territory, thinking they could muscle in because I was young, untested. I showed them exactly how tested I was by dismantling 3 of their operations in one night and sending Rafael's lieutenant back to him in pieces. The casual way he said it, like discussing a business merger instead of dismemberment, should have horrified me. Instead, it just made me more aware of the kind of man I was trusting with my brother's life. A killer. A monster. Someone who solved problems with violence and terror. Someone who was currently my only hope. There's something else you should know. Eric turned from the window, and the look on his face made my stomach drop. About how long I've been aware of your situation. Your family's situation. What do you mean? Your commute route. He said it like a confession. You take the red line from Addison, transfer at Fullerton, walk 3 blocks west to the office. You stop at the same coffee cart every Monday and Thursday. You call your brother every Tuesday at 7 p.m. You visit your mother's grave the first Sunday of every month. Ice spread through my veins. How do you? Because I've been watching you, Linda. Since the day you interviewed for this position 3 years ago. He moved closer, and I should have backed away but found myself frozen as he continued. I know about your father's gambling debts. The medical bills from your mother's cancer treatment that bankrupted your family. I know about the men who approached you last winter outside your apartment, loan sharks looking to collect on your father's outstanding balance. I know you work a second job on weekends at a bookstore in Lincoln Park to help cover Mateo's college expenses. Each revelation was a violation, an invasion of privacy that should have sent me running, but all I could focus on was one detail. The loan sharks. They never came back after that night. Because I paid them. Eric's voice was steady, unapologetic. Anonymously. Cleared your father's entire debt along with a generous incentive to forget your family existed. Why would you? And the new locks on your apartment door. He kept going like he needed to purge every secret at once. You thought your landlord installed them as a security upgrade. He didn't. I did. After those men showed up, I couldn't risk your safety, so I had a security company replace every lock, upgrade your building's entire system, and install cameras in the hallways. My breath came faster, shallower. That's, Eric, that's obsessive. He supplied the word I couldn't say. Controlling. Invasive. Everything I know it is, but I couldn't stop myself because every time I thought about something happening to you, every time I imagined you getting hurt because I wasn't paying attention, He stopped himself, jaw clenched, and I watched him struggle with something dark and desperate that lived beneath his carefully controlled surface. Your sister. The words fell from my lips before I could stop them, connecting pieces I'd deliberately avoided examining too closely. DeLuca mentioned once that you lost your sister. That's why you. She was 22. Eric's voice went flat, emotionless in the way that meant he was feeling too much. Maria. She worked as a hostess at a restaurant in Little Italy, neutral territory, completely legitimate business. But the Rossi family decided to send me a message about respecting boundaries, so they took her. Held her for 3 days while demanding I withdraw from a territory dispute. I complied. Gave them everything they wanted. And they sent her back to me in pieces anyway. The image his words painted was horrific, but what made my chest ache was the emptiness in his eyes, like he'd carved out the part of himself that could feel grief and replaced it with cold, calculated vengeance. That's when you became this. I gestured at him, at the expensive suit and the gun and the empire of violence. That's when you stopped being Eric and became Eric DeLuca. That's when I learned that showing mercy is the same as showing weakness in this world. His hand came up to my face again, thumb tracing my cheekbone. And that's why I won't let the Serranos take something else from me. Why I won't lose you too. The possessiveness in those words should have terrified me. This wasn't healthy devotion or appropriate care, this was something twisted and consuming, but I found myself leaning into his touch anyway because he was offering me something I'd never had before. Someone who would burn the world down to keep me safe. You were mine long before today, Linda, Eric whispered, his forehead pressing against mine. From the moment you walked into my office for that interview, looking terrified but determined. From the first time you handed me coffee and your fingers brushed mine. From every late night we spent working side by side, every time you smiled at something I said, every. His phone rang, shattering the moment. Eric pulled back, his expression shifting instantly from vulnerable confession to lethal focus as he answered. What? I watched his face harden as whoever was on the other end spoke, watched his free hand curl into a fist, watched something murderous settle into his features. Put him through. Eric's voice was arctic. There was a click, and then a new voice filled the office, smooth, accented, mocking. Eric DeLuca. I was wondering when the girl would finally break and tell you. Took her longer than I expected, she must really care about keeping you in the dark. Rafael Serrano. Even through the phone, his voice carried the kind of entitled cruelty that came from generations of Mafia power. Where's the boy? Eric's question was deceptively calm. Safe. For now. Though I must say, I'm impressed by your secretary's loyalty. 3 days of threats, and she still tried to quit rather than steal from you. Very noble. Very stupid. Eric's eyes found mine, and the rage burning there made my breath catch. State your terms, Raphael. Terms? Laughter echoed through the speaker. There are no terms, DeLuca. This isn't a negotiation. The girl has something I want, and I'm going to get it one way or another. Though I must admit, I'm curious, is she really worth burning your entire operation for? Is your pretty little secretary really worth handing over years of carefully concealed evidence? Careful, Raphael. Eric's voice dropped to a whisper that made the temperature in the room plummet. You're talking about something you don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly. The mockery intensified. The great Eric DeLuca has a weakness. Finally, after all these years, you care about something other than power and territory. Tell me, does she know what you really are? Does she know about the things you've done? The people you've... The girl is my assistant. Eric's interruption was sharp. Nothing more. Liar. Raphael's laugh was delighted. I can hear it in your voice, DeLuca. She's not just an employee. She's your weakness. Your soft spot. And I'm going to exploit it until you're bleeding out in front of me, begging me to end your pathetic. Eric's face went ice cold, not angry, not even furious, but something far more terrifying. Absolutely, lethally calm. Then I will show them what happens when someone touches what's mine, he whispered, and disconnected the call. The silence that followed was deafening. The office exploded into controlled chaos within minutes of Eric's call with Rafael Serrano. I watched from the doorway of his private office as his entire organization mobilized like a military operation, men in expensive suits answering phones in rapid Italian, computer screens lighting up with maps and satellite imagery, weapons being distributed from what I'd always assumed was a supply closet but was apparently an armory that would make most police departments jealous. All 5 territories, boss. Luca was confirming orders while simultaneously coordinating teams through an earpiece. That's going to draw attention. Police, FBI, everyone's going to notice when the entire South Side goes quiet. Let them notice. Eric's voice carried absolute authority as he rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing more of the tattoos that mapped violence across his forearms. I want every street corner, every warehouse, every building the Serranos have ever looked at twice covered by our people. Nothing moves in this city without me knowing about it. I watched him transform. This was Eric DeLuca in his element, commanding an empire with the same ease most people use to order coffee, and something inside me recognized that this man, this dangerous, terrifying man, was using every ounce of his considerable power to save my brother. For me. Linda. Eric's hand found the small of my back, guiding me further into the office as his men continued coordinating outside. I need you to stay close. If the Serranos try to contact you again, I'll tell you immediately. I finished, because that much was obvious now. No more secrets. No more trying to handle this alone. His eyes searched mine, looking for something, doubt, fear, regret, but whatever he saw made his expression soften fractionally. Sit. You haven't eaten since yesterday. I can't eat when Mateo. You can, and you will. He guided me to the leather sofa against the wall, then moved to his desk where someone had left a tray of food I hadn't noticed. Because when we find your brother, I need you coherent and capable, not collapsing from exhaustion and malnutrition. The logic was sound, even if my stomach protested the idea of food when my baby brother was bleeding and terrified somewhere in this city. Eric returned with a plate, fruit, cheese, bread, and sat beside me, close enough that his thigh pressed against mine, his body heat seeping through expensive fabric. Eat, he ordered quietly, picking up a strawberry and holding it to my lips. The gesture was intimate, domestic, completely at odds with the military operation happening outside his office, but I found myself accepting it anyway, too exhausted to fight both him and myself. Tell me about your territories. I needed distraction, needed to understand the machine I'd set in motion. You said all 5. What does that mean? Eric's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. It means I control more of Chicago than most people realize. South Side, West Side, parts of downtown, the docks, and a section of the North Side that's been disputed for years. Each territory has a captain, teams of soldiers, networks of informants. When I give an order, it filters down through hundreds of people within minutes. I tried to wrap my mind around the scale. That's an army. Yes. No apology, no justification. Just acknowledgement. And right now, that army is looking for one 22-year-old graduate student because he matters to you, and you matter to me. The weight of that statement settled over us like a blanket, heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Outside, I heard someone shout coordinates in Italian, heard the sound of vehicles pulling away, heard the organized chaos of a Mafia family going to war. Because of me. Because of Matteo. Because Eric DeLuca had decided my brother's life was worth mobilizing his entire empire. I don't understand you. The confession slipped out between bites of food I couldn't taste. 3 years, Eric. 3 years I've worked for you, and I thought I knew what kind of man you were. Cold. Calculating. Dangerous. But this, I gestured at the controlled chaos beyond his office. This is something else entirely. This is what I am when something threatens what's mine. His hand found my face again, a gesture that was becoming familiar, possessive. You've seen the surface, Linda. The businessman. The negotiator. But underneath, I'm exactly what everyone says I am, a killer who takes what he wants and destroys anything that gets in his way. You're trying to scare me off. I'm trying to be honest. His thumb traced my lower lip. Because if we survive this, if I get your brother back alive and deal with the Serranos permanently, there's no going back to how things were. No more professional distance. No more pretending I don't want you in ways that have nothing to do with filing systems and coffee preferences. My breath caught at the raw hunger in his voice. Eric. Boss. Luca's appearance in the doorway made us both turn. The Serranos abandoned another safe house 20 minutes ago. They're staying mobile, changing locations every few hours. We're tracking vehicle patterns, but they're smart about it. Eric's jaw clenched. How long until we narrow down their current location? Hours. Maybe longer. Luca's expression was grim. They know we're looking now. They're going to ground deeper. Which meant more time for Matteo to be hurt, more hours of terror, more chances for something to go catastrophically wrong. I stood abruptly, unable to sit still while my brother suffered, and crossed to the window overlooking the city Eric controlled, the city that was currently being torn apart looking for one person. This is my fault. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. Matteo's paying for my choices. For working here. For not seeing this coming. Linda. Eric's hand settled on my shoulders from behind. Look at me. I turned, and he was right there, close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes, could smell bergamot and danger, could feel the heat radiating from his body. Your brother is suffering because the Serranos are cowards who target innocent people to gain leverage. His hand slid down my arms, fingers intertwining with mine. This is not your fault. This is Raphael trying to hurt me by hurting you, and he's going to learn exactly why that was a fatal mistake. A tear escaped despite my best efforts to hold it back, and Eric's expression softened as his thumb came up to catch it. I will bring him home, Linda. The promise was delivered with absolute certainty. Even if I have to burn Chicago to the ground to do it. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. My phone buzzed, and we both froze. Unknown number. Again. Eric's expression went lethal. Put it on speaker. I did, hands shaking as I accepted the call and heard Rafael Serrano's smooth, mocking voice fill the office. Miss Verga. I hope you're enjoying watching your boss tear the city apart looking for your brother. Very dramatic. Very passionate. But ultimately pointless. Where is he? My voice came out stronger than I expected. Where's Mateo? Safe. Uncomfortable, but safe. Raphael's amusement was audible. I have a new proposal for you, Linda. One that doesn't involve stolen ledgers or betraying your devoted boss. Eric's hand found mine, squeezing hard enough to hurt. What do you want? I asked. Dinner. The answer was simple, terrifying. Tomorrow night. Just you and me. A private conversation about your brother's future and what you're willing to do to ensure it. Come alone, dressed appropriately, and perhaps we can come to an arrangement that doesn't end with dear Mateo losing any more teeth. The image of Mateo's bruised, bleeding face from the video flashed through my mind. And if I refuse? Then I start sending you pieces of him in the mail. Raphael's voice lost all pretense of civility. Starting with his fingers. 1 per hour. Until you agree to meet with me on my terms. Eric's entire body had gone rigid beside me, his free hand curled into a fist so tight his knuckles were white. Where? I asked before Eric could stop me. Ah, there's my cooperative girl. Raphael's satisfaction was obscene. I'll send you the address tomorrow. 8 p.m. Wear something that shows you understand the gravity of the situation. And Linda? If I see any of DeLuca's men within 5 blocks of the restaurant, your brother dies immediately. The call disconnected. Eric's hand tightened on mine to the point of pain, his breathing harsh and controlled like he was physically restraining himself from putting his fist through something expensive. You're not going. His voice was pure command. Absolutely not. Under no circumstances. He'll kill Mateo if I don't. He'll kill Mateo if you do. Eric turned me to face him, his expression desperate in a way I'd never seen. This isn't about dinner, Linda. This is about isolating you, making you vulnerable. Raphael wants you alone because whatever he's planning requires you to be away from my protection. Then what do I do? The question came out broken. How do I save him? Eric's hands framed my face, his forehead pressing against mine in a gesture of shared desperation. You trust me. You let me figure this out. You don't go anywhere near that restaurant. I have to. The certainty settled into my bones. If there's even a chance it could save Mateo, I have to try. Even if it destroys you. Even then. Eric's eyes closed, pain flashing across his features, and when he spoke his voice was barely a whisper. Then I'll be there too. Hidden. Watching. And if Raphael touches you, if he so much as makes you uncomfortable, I'll kill him myself regardless of the consequences. It wasn't comfort. It wasn't safety. But it was something, a promise that I wouldn't face this alone, even if facing it together meant we both might not survive. Comment below where you're watching from, and tell me, should Linda trust Eric's plan, or is walking into Rafael Serrano's dinner invitation the biggest mistake of her life? The next 24 hours passed in a blur of strategic planning and escalating tension that made the air in Eric's office feel thick enough to choke on. Absolutely not. Eric's voice was flat, final, as he stood behind his desk reviewing surveillance maps while I sat across from him, exhausted and desperate. You're not walking into Rafael's trap. We'll find another way. What other way? I stood, planting my hands on his desk. We've searched every Serrano property in the city. Mateo could be anywhere, and Rafael knows it. This dinner is the only leverage we have. It's not leverage, it's a death sentence. Eric looked up, his dark eyes blazing. Rafael doesn't want to negotiate, Linda. He wants you isolated, vulnerable, away from my protection so he can use you against me in ways that don't involve simple ransom demands. Then what do you suggest? My voice cracked. Wait while he starts cutting off Mateo's fingers. Hope we get lucky and find him before Rafael decides my brother isn't worth keeping alive anymore. Eric moved around the desk with predatory grace, his hands settling on my shoulders. I suggest you trust me to handle this. Let me deal with Rafael my way. Your way involves war. I pulled back from his touch, needing space to think clearly. Your way means more violence, more death, and no guarantee that Mateo survives the crossfire. At least this gives us a chance. A chance at what? At you becoming Rafael's hostage? At him using you to force my hand in ways you can't imagine? Eric's control was fracturing, desperation bleeding through. I won't lose you to save your brother. I can't. The confession hung between us, raw and selfish and heartbreakingly honest. You don't get to make that choice. My voice went quiet, dangerous. Mateo is my family. My responsibility. And if there's even the smallest possibility that meeting with Rafael could save him, then I'm taking it. Linda. I'm going, Eric. I met his eyes, letting him see the certainty there. With or without your approval. With or without your protection. I'm going. His jaw clenched hard enough that I could see the muscle jump, his hands curling into fists at his sides. You're asking me to let you walk into hell. I'm telling you I'm walking into hell regardless. I softened slightly, reaching up to touch his face. But I'd rather do it knowing you're watching my back. Something broken and desperate flashed across Eric's expression before he pulled me against his chest, his arms wrapping around me with crushing intensity, his lips against my hair. If anything happens to you, if Rafael touches you, hurts you, even makes you uncomfortable, there won't be enough of him left to bury. Do you understand? I nodded against his chest, breathing in bergamot and danger, letting myself have this moment of safety before walking into the lion's den. I understand. But understanding Eric's promise and actually trusting it to keep me safe were two very different things. The restaurant Rafael chose was upscale Italian in a neutral territory, expensive enough to seem legitimate, public enough that outright violence would draw attention, private enough that the VIP section could hide a multitude of sins. I'd dressed carefully in a black dress that was elegant without being suggestive, professional without being cold, my hair pulled back to show the simple gold earrings Eric had insisted I wear. They're trackers, he'd explained while fastening them himself, his fingers gentle on my ears. I'll know exactly where you are every second. And if something goes wrong, you'll burn the restaurant down with everyone in it. I'd finished, only half joking. Not everyone. His smile had been dark. Just the ones who deserve it. Now, sitting in Eric's car outside my apartment building where I'd insisted on going to change, I watched his men position themselves in the lobby, on the street, probably on my actual fire escape. I can't leave with them watching. I turned to Eric. Raphael said no security within 5 blocks, and they're obviously yours. They're staying exactly where they are. Eric's tone brooked no argument. Raphael can believe you came alone. The reality is different. Eric. Non-negotiable, Linda. He gripped my chin, forcing me to meet his eyes. You want to walk into this dinner? Fine. But you do it my way, with my protection, or you don't do it at all. The possessiveness should have annoyed me. Instead, it just made me feel marginally safer about the monumentally stupid thing I was about to do. I need to go alone from here, I compromised. Your men stay at this perimeter, but I take a cab to the restaurant by myself. Otherwise Raphael will know you're involved. Eric looked like he wanted to argue, but finally nodded sharply. The earrings stay on. You keep your phone on. And if I say the word out, you run. Immediately. No questions. Agreed. He pulled me into a kiss that was desperate and claiming and tasted like goodbye, his hands tangling in my hair with enough force to hurt, and when he finally pulled back his eyes were absolutely lethal. Come back to me, Linda. Whatever happens in there, you come back to me. I slipped out of the car before I could change my mind, before I could let his fear become mine, before I could acknowledge that I might not survive the next few hours. The cab ride felt simultaneously too long and too short, my heart hammering against my ribs as the city lights blurred past, as we pulled up to the restaurant's elegant facade, as I stepped out onto the sidewalk and saw Raphael Serrano waiting at the entrance. He was handsome in the way snakes are beautiful, sleek, dangerous, with dark hair slicked back and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, his smile revealing perfect white teeth that somehow made him look more predatory. Miss Verga. He took my hand, kissing my knuckles in a gesture that made my skin crawl. Punctual. I appreciate that in a woman. Where's my brother? I pulled my hand back, refusing to play whatever game he'd orchestrated. Straight to business. How very American. Raphael's smile didn't waver as he guided me inside with a hand on my lower back that felt like ownership. Let's eat first. Discuss terms. Then we'll talk about your brother's location. The VIP section was private, secluded, with heavy curtains blocking the view from the main restaurant and 2 men built like trucks standing guard at the entrance, security that was definitely not standard for a dinner date. Raphael pulled out my chair with exaggerated courtesy, then settled across from me, his dark eyes assessing in a way that made me feel exposed. You're more beautiful than your employee photo suggested, he observed, pouring wine I had no intention of drinking. Eric has excellent taste in assistants. This isn't about me. I kept my voice steady. You wanted to meet. I'm here. Now tell me what it will take to get Matteo back alive. Ah, yes. Your brother. Raphael's expression shifted to mock sympathy. Such a shame, really. Young man with his whole life ahead of him, caught in the crossfire of a war he doesn't understand. But that's what happens when family members work for dangerous men, isn't it? They become collateral. What do you want? I repeated, forcing myself not to react to the implicit threat. Raphael leaned back, studying me with the intensity of a predator deciding where to bite first. Initially, I wanted the ledgers. Eric's financial records, his offshore accounts, every transaction that could put him away for life. But watching him tear Chicago apart looking for your brother made me realize something far more valuable. My stomach dropped. What? You. His smile widened. You're his weakness, Miss Verga. In 5 years of trying to break Eric DeLuca, I've never seen him show genuine emotion for anything except territory and revenge. But you? You make him desperate. Irrational. Human. I'm his secretary. You're his obsession. Raphael interrupted, leaning forward. I've had people watching you for months. The way he looks at you when he thinks no one notices. The security he's placed around your apartment. The anonymous payment that cleared your father's gambling debts. Eric DeLuca doesn't do favors, Miss Verga. He doesn't protect people out of kindness. But for you? He's breaking every rule he's ever made. The accuracy of his observations made my blood run cold. So here's my offer, Raphael continued, his voice dropping to something intimate and vile. You give me the ledgers and yourself. Become my guest for, shall we say, an extended period. Let Eric watch as I take everything he values and use it against him. In exchange, your brother goes free. Unharmed. With enough money to disappear and start over somewhere Eric's influence can't reach. The proposal was so obscene, so calculating, that for a moment I couldn't process it. You want me to trade myself for Matteo? I said it flatly, refusing to show the horror clawing up my throat. I want you to trade your freedom for your brother's life, yes. Raphael's smile was pleased, satisfied. And before you consider refusing, let me show you what happens if you don't cooperate. He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before turning it to face me, and the video that played made bile rise in my throat. Matteo, tied to the same chair, his face more bruised than before, blood dripping from a fresh cut above his eye, and Raphael's voice off camera asking casual questions about pain thresholds while someone just out of frame held what looked like pliers. Stop. I couldn't watch anymore. Stop, please. Then agree. Raphael's voice was reasonable, friendly even. The ledgers and yourself, and your brother goes free. It's a simple transaction, Miss Verga. Surely Eric taught you about cost-benefit analysis. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth written across his smug, satisfied face. He was never going to let Matteo go. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a trap designed to take both of us, to hurt Eric through me while eliminating any leverage we might have had. You're lying. The words fell from my lips with absolute certainty. You'll take whatever I give you and kill Matteo anyway. Because that's what you do. That's what Raphael Serrano does. You don't honor deals, you don't keep your word, you just take and destroy Anne. The sound of shattering glass cut off my accusation as the restaurant's front windows exploded inward, and suddenly there were men pouring through every entrance, Eric's men, I realized with a jolt of recognition, moving with military precision and overwhelming force. Raphael lunged across the table, his hand grabbing my wrist hard enough to bruise, his other hand producing a gun that he pressed against my temple before I could even process moving. Call them off. Raphael's composure had shattered into fury. Call off your dogs, DeLuca, or I paint this restaurant with her brain matter. Let her go, Raphael. Eric's voice cut through the chaos like a blade, and I watched him emerge from the main dining area, gun drawn, expression absolutely murderous, flanked by Luca and at least a dozen armed men. Let her go, and I'll consider making your death quick. You were supposed to stay away. Raphael's gun pressed harder against my skull. The deal was she comes alone. There was never a deal. Eric's voice was arctic as he moved closer, his weapon trained steadily on Raphael's head. Just you trying to take something that belongs to me. Again. She's not property. No. Eric's eyes found mine across the destroyed restaurant, and the possession burning there made my breath catch. She's everything. And you just made the fatal mistake of threatening her life in front of me. Raphael's grip tightened painfully. I'll kill her. Right now. I swear to God, DeLuca. Then you'll die before her body hits the ground. Eric's promise was absolute. And your entire family will follow. Every Serrano in Chicago will be dead by morning. Your territories will burn. Your legacy will be ash. All because you couldn't accept that you've already lost. I haven't lost anything. Raphael's desperation was showing now, his control fracturing. I have her. I have your weakness right here, and you're going to. Eric fired. The shot was precise, professional, placing a bullet through Raphael's shoulder, the one connected to the arm holding me, and I felt his grip spasm and release as he screamed, his gun clattering to the floor as I dove away, as Eric's men surged forward, as the entire situation devolved into controlled chaos. Strong hands caught me before I hit the ground, Eric's hands, I realized distantly, his body a shield between me and Raphael's continued screaming, and when he spoke his voice carried across the entire restaurant with the weight of absolute authority. Raphael Serrano. Eric's words were formal, ritualistic, heavy with tradition. For the crime of threatening my blood, for the violation of attempting to harm what is mine, for the disrespect shown to my family, I invoke la sentenza. The restaurant went silent except for Raphael's ragged breathing. The ancient rite, Eric continued, his arms still wrapped protectively around me. Trial by combat between dons. To the death. Witnessed by the council. Binding upon both families. Raphael laughed, a broken, desperate sound. You can't, that tradition hasn't been invoked in decades. I just invoked it. Eric's smile was lethal. And you will answer. Or be branded a coward for the rest of your short, miserable life. This wasn't just a threat. This was a declaration of war wrapped in tradition, a challenge that couldn't be refused without losing everything that made Raphael powerful. This ends with blood, Eric whispered, his lips against my hair. His blood. For daring to touch you. The safe house Eric brought me to was industrial, fortified, with enough security to hold off a small army, which, given the circumstances, was probably the point. I sat on the leather sofa in what passed for a living room, wrapped in Eric's jacket because I couldn't stop shaking, while his consigliere, an elderly man named Salvatore who looked like someone's kindly grandfather until you saw his eyes, explained exactly what la sentenza meant. It is the oldest tradition, Salvatore said in accented English, his hands folded on the table. From the old country. When two dons cannot resolve their differences through negotiation, when blood has been spilled and honor demands satisfaction, la sentenza provides a path. Single combat. No weapons beyond what the challenged party chooses. Fight to the death, witnessed by the neutral council. That's barbaric. My voice was hollow. That's justice. Eric stood by the window, his back to us, tension radiating from every line of his body. Raphael threatened you directly. In front of witnesses. Under Mafia law, that's an unforgivable offense that demands blood payment. So you're going to fight him. I tried to process it. Just the two of you. Until one of you is dead. Yes. The simplicity of the answer made my stomach drop. What if you lose? Eric turned then, his expression absolutely certain. I won't. But what if you do? I stood, crossing to him. What happens to me? To Matteo? To your entire organization if Raphael kills you? He won't kill me. Eric's hands came up to frame my face. Because I have something Raphael doesn't, a reason to survive that's more important than pride or territory or power. Eric. You, Linda. His forehead pressed against mine. You're my reason. And I will not leave you unprotected in this world. Salvatore cleared his throat delicately. The challenge has been issued. The council has been notified. La sentenza will take place in 3 days, giving both parties time to prepare. Once begun, it cannot be stopped until one don is dead. 3 days. 72 hours until Eric walked into a fight to the death because of me. This is my fault. The guilt crushed down on me. If I hadn't gone to that dinner, if I'd listened to you. Then Raphael would have killed your brother and moved on to his next target. Eric interrupted. This confrontation was inevitable, Linda. Raphael has been pushing boundaries for years, trying to find a way to hurt me. You just became the catalyst, not the cause. Salvatore stood, gathering his papers. I will coordinate with the council regarding the arena and witnesses. Boss, you should rest. Prepare. La Sentenza is not won through anger alone. After he left, silence settled over the safe house like a blanket, heavy and suffocating. Tell me about your sister. The words escaped before I could stop them. Maria. You said the Rossi family took her, but you never explained why you couldn't save her. Eric's expression went distant, haunted. Because I played by the rules. They said they wanted territory, I gave them territory. They said they wanted money, I gave them money. They said they wanted respect, I gave them everything they demanded. And they killed her anyway because I'd shown weakness by caring about her survival more than maintaining power. So you never showed weakness again. Understanding clicked into place. Until you. His hands tightened on my face. Until I hired a secretary who walked into my office looking terrified but determined, who never flinched from the darkness, who made me want things I'd convinced myself I could never have. Safety. Normalcy. Someone to protect instead of something to control. I wasn't trying to quit you, I confessed, the words I'd been holding back for days finally spilling out. That morning in the wardrobe. I wasn't trying to leave because I wanted to. I was trying to save you from the consequences of my choices. From the Serranos using me against you. From caring about someone who could be turned into a weapon. I know. Eric's smile was sad, understanding. But you don't get to make that choice for me, Linda. You don't get to decide that you're not worth fighting for. Worth killing for. Worth risking everything for. Even your life. Especially my life. His thumb traced my lower lip. Because without you, I'm just what everyone thinks I am, a monster who builds empires on corpses. But with you, I'm a man who might deserve something better than blood and violence. The moment stretched between us, charged and trembling and dangerous, and when Eric's lips found mine it wasn't desperate or claiming, it was gentle, reverent, like he was trying to memorize the feeling of something good before walking into hell. I kissed him back, pouring 3 years of forbidden longing and desperate hope into the connection, and when we finally broke apart we were both breathless. I need you to promise me something. Eric's voice was rough. If something goes wrong during La Sentenza, if somehow Raphael gets the upper hand, DeLuca will get you out. You'll disappear. New identity, new life, far from Chicago and the Serranos and everything that could hurt you. I'm not agreeing to that. Promise me, Linda. His desperation was showing now. Promise me you'll survive this even if I don't. Only if you promise to come back to me. I gripped his shirt, holding him close. Only if you swear you'll win and we'll figure out what comes next together. I promise. The vow was absolute. I will always come back to you. He left the room then, returning moments later with a small black case that he opened to reveal a compact pistol, smaller than the weapons his men carried, elegant in a deadly sort of way. I can't let you into the arena. Eric's voice was steady as he showed me how to hold it, how to aim, how to fire. But I need you to have this. Just in case. I've never shot a gun. My hands shook as I took it. Point at what you want to hit. Pull the trigger. The recoil will surprise you, but you're stronger than you think. His hands covered mine, guiding my grip. I pray to God you never have to use this, but if you do, don't hesitate. Don't second guess. Just pull the trigger and keep pulling until the threat stops moving. The weight of the weapon felt wrong in my hands, too heavy, too final, too much responsibility for someone who'd spent her life filing papers and avoiding violence. But Eric was walking into a death match because of me, and if holding this gun meant I could protect myself while he fought, then I'd learn to carry it. 3 days passed in a blur of preparation, training, and mounting dread that made it impossible to eat or sleep or think about anything except the impending fight. The arena was an abandoned warehouse on neutral territory, its interior converted into something that looked like it came from ancient Rome: dirt floor, raised gallery for witnesses, steel barriers marking the boundaries of the fighting space. I sat in the gallery beside Salvatore, my new gun hidden in my bag, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat as Eric entered the arena below. He'd stripped to the waist, revealing the full map of tattoos across his chest and arms, his muscles defined from years of actual combat rather than gym aesthetics, and when his eyes found mine in the gallery he mouthed 3 words that made my breath catch. "I love you." Then Raphael entered from the opposite side, also shirtless, also armed with whatever the council had provided, knives, I realized with horror, long and wicked-looking and designed for maximum damage, and the neutral moderator stepped forward to announce the terms. La sentenza has been invoked. Eric DeLuca challenges Rafael Serrano for the crime of threatening blood. Combat will continue until one party yields or dies. The council recognizes this challenge as binding under the old laws. The moderator stepped back. The fight began. Comment below with your location and tell me, will Eric survive La sentenza, or has Linda just watched the man she loves walk into his own execution? The first clash of steel on steel made me flinch so hard I nearly fell from my seat in the gallery. Eric and Raphael circled each other like predators, their knives catching the harsh warehouse lights as they tested distance and reflexes, looking for weaknesses in stance or guard. The air was thick with tension and the smell of dirt and old blood, the gallery packed with witnesses from both families and the neutral council, all of them silent, watching, waiting for first blood. Raphael struck first, a vicious slash aimed at Eric's ribs that he barely dodged, the blade close enough to draw a thin red line across his tattooed chest. Eric countered with a brutal upward thrust that Raphael deflected, their knives locking for a moment before they broke apart, circling again. "You're slower than I expected, DeLuca." Raphael's voice carried across the arena, mocking. "Maybe your obsession with your secretary has made you soft." Eric didn't respond, didn't waste breath on words when violence would speak louder, and his next attack was lightning fast, a combination of strikes that drove Raphael backward, forcing him onto the defensive as their blades met in a flurry of sparks and deadly intent. Blood began to flow, from a cut on Raphael's shoulder, from a gash across Eric's forearm, from a dozen smaller wounds that turned both men slick and red in the harsh light. They fought with the kind of vicious intensity that spoke to years of rivalry, personal hatred, the accumulated weight of every insult and territory dispute and perceived slight crystallized into pure violence. I couldn't look away even though every instinct screamed to close my eyes, to not watch the man I loved bleeding and fighting for his life in an arena that looked like something from humanity's darkest history. My phone buzzed in my bag. I almost ignored it. Nothing could be more important than the fight happening below, but something made me check, made me pull out the device with shaking hands and see the message from an unknown number. A video file. My stomach dropped as I opened it, pressing the phone close so the sound wouldn't carry, and what I saw made the entire world tilt sideways. Matteo. Still tied to that same chair. But now there was a timer in the corner of the frame, counting down from 30 minutes, and a voice off camera explaining in clinical detail exactly what would happen when it reached 0. "Insurance policy," the voice said. "In case the boss doesn't survive La sentenza. The kid dies regardless. Can't leave loose ends." The video ended. Raphael had never intended to honor any deal. Win or lose, Matteo was scheduled for execution in 30 minutes. The despair that crashed over me was suffocating, absolute. I'd walked into Raphael's trap, let Eric invoke an ancient ritual that could get him killed, and for what? Matteo was going to die anyway, and I was going to watch Eric bleed out in this warehouse, and everything I tried to do to save the people I loved had been catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. Below, Eric and Raphael crashed together again, this time abandoning the knives for brutal hand-to-hand combat that involved elbows and knees and a kind of strikes designed to break bones rather than just draw blood. Eric's knuckles split against Raphael's jaw. Raphael's elbow caught Eric's temple hard enough to stagger him. They were both exhausted, both bleeding, both pushed to the absolute limit of endurance and skill. Salvatore leaned close, his voice quiet. The dawn is tiring. This cannot continue much longer. He was right. Eric was slowing, his movements less crisp, his breathing labored. Raphael noticed too. I watched the moment he recognized weakness, watched him press his advantage with renewed energy that spoke to better conditioning or less injury or just the desperate knowledge that if he didn't end this soon, Eric's superior skill would eventually prevail. Raphael retrieved his knife, a move that made the gallery murmur because it signaled the final phase, and Eric mirrored him, both men bloodied and exhausted but committed to seeing this through to its inevitable, lethal conclusion. That's when I saw the movement in my peripheral vision. A man in the Serranos section of the gallery, young, nervous-looking, his hand disappearing inside his jacket in a gesture I'd seen Eric's men make 1,000 times when reaching for concealed weapons. He was pulling a gun. Aimed at Eric's back. Time seemed to slow as my hand moved on instinct, reaching into my bag, fingers closing around the compact pistol Eric had given me, the weight of it suddenly feeling right instead of wrong as I pulled it free and raised it with shaking hands. The Serrano soldier's gun cleared his jacket, his arm extending, his finger moving toward the trigger. I fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, the recoil shocking even though Eric had warned me, and I watched the soldier's head snap back, watched him crumple, watched blood spray across the witnesses behind him as the entire arena went absolutely, horrifyingly silent. Every eye turned to me. I was still holding the gun, smoke curling from the barrel, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it, my ears ringing from the shot, my mind trying to process that I just killed someone, actually pulled the trigger and ended a human life. Cheaters! Eric's voice roared across the arena, his fury absolute. The Serranos break tradition. They forfeit honor. The council erupted in chaos, accusations and denials and shouting in Italian, but I couldn't focus on any of it because Raphael had used the distraction to strike, his knife finding Eric's side, sliding between ribs with the kind of precision that spoke to lethal intent. Eric made a sound, pain and rage combined, and something inside me shattered completely. Eric. His name tore from my throat, raw and desperate. He looked up at me then, blood running from the wound in his side, and something in his expression shifted. Not weakness. Not defeat. But a terrible, focused determination fueled by my voice, my fear, my presence in this arena. Raphael pulled his knife free for another strike, the killing blow, aimed at Eric's throat. Eric moved faster than should have been possible for someone bleeding and exhausted, catching Raphael's wrist mid-thrust, twisting with brutal efficiency until something snapped and Raphael screamed, his knife falling from nerveless fingers. Then Eric's hands were around Raphael's throat, no weapons, no finesse, just raw strength and absolute fury, and I watched the life drain from Raphael Serrano's eyes as Eric choked him, as he squeezed, as he refused to let go even when Raphael stopped struggling and went limp. For threatening what's mine, Eric growled, his voice carrying across the silent arena. For touching Linda. For thinking you could take from me without consequences. Raphael's body hit the ground. The fight was over. Eric DeLuca had won La Sentenza. The arena remained frozen for a long moment, Eric standing over Raphael's corpse, breathing hard, blood running from multiple wounds, his eyes finding mine across the space with an intensity that made my breath catch. Then chaos erupted. The council was shouting about Serrano violations, about the attempt to cheat during sacred combat, about how the challenge was invalid and Eric's victory absolute. Serrano family members were being detained by neutral enforcers, weapons being confiscated, the entire remaining leadership structure being placed under investigation for breaking tradition. I barely registered any of it because I was moving, down from the gallery, across the arena floor, my legs shaking so badly I could barely walk but needing to reach Eric, needing to touch him and confirm he was alive, that he'd survived, that. Strong hands caught me before I collapsed, and suddenly Eric was there, solid and real and bleeding but alive, his arms wrapping around me with crushing intensity despite his injuries. "You shot him." His voice was rough against my hair. "You saved my life, Linda. You killed for me." "He was going to shoot you in the back, I couldn't let him," the words tumbled out in a rush. "And Mateo, Eric, they sent me a video, he's going to die in." I checked my phone with shaking hands. 20 minutes, they're going to kill him regardless and I don't know where he is. "Luca." Eric's command cut through the chaos. "Linda received a video. Trace it. Find the location. Now." Luca appeared with frightening speed, taking my phone, his fingers flying across the screen while shouting orders in Italian to men I hadn't even noticed positioning themselves around the perimeter. "Boss, you need medical attention," someone tried to guide Eric away. "After we find the boy." Eric's refusal was absolute. "Not before." "Got it." Luca's voice was triumphant. "Shipping container. Port of Chicago, Section D, 7. Sending coordinates to all teams now." Eric moved despite his injuries, despite the blood still running down his side, pulling me with him toward the exit where his men were already bringing cars around, the entire organization mobilizing with the same precision I'd witnessed days ago when this nightmare began. "Stay with me." Eric's hand tightened on mine as we slid into the back of an SUV, Luca already in the driver's seat peeling out before the door fully closed. "Whatever we find, Linda, stay with me." The drive to the port felt eternal and instantaneous, my mind unable to process the timer still counting down, the possibility that we'd arrive too late, that Mateo would be. The SUV screeched to a halt outside a shipping yard lit by harsh floodlights, and I was running before Eric could stop me, following the sound of shouting and metal being torn apart as his men forced open a red container marked with Serrano shipping codes. "Mateo." I reached the container just as they pulled the doors wide, revealing my brother, alive, unconscious, bleeding from wounds I couldn't even count but breathing, definitely breathing. I fell to my knees beside him, my hands shaking as I checked his pulse, felt the steady beat beneath my fingers, watched his chest rise and fall with shallow but consistent breaths. "He's alive." The words came out broken, disbelieving. "Oh God, he's alive. Medics." Eric's voice commanded immediate action, and suddenly there were professionals swarming, loading Mateo onto a stretcher with professional efficiency, starting IVs and assessing injuries while I held his hand and refused to let go. "He'll survive." The lead medic's assessment was cautious but hopeful. "Multiple contusions, possible broken ribs, signs of dehydration and shock, but nothing immediately life-threatening. He needs a hospital, but he'll survive." The relief that crashed through me was so intense I actually swayed, would have fallen if Eric's arm hadn't wrapped around my waist, holding me upright against his solid warmth despite his own injuries. "Take him to St. Michael's," Eric ordered. "Private floor, armed guards, no visitors without my explicit approval. And get me a status update every hour." The ambulance pulled away with Mateo, and only then did I turn to really look at Eric, at the blood still running from his side, at the exhaustion written across his features, at the way he was holding himself like each breath hurt. "You're injured." "I'm fine." His smile was tired but genuine. "Nothing that won't heal. Unlike Raphael." "Eric, you need. What I need is to make sure everyone understands exactly what happened tonight." He turned to face the assembled crowd, his men, neutral council members, even some subdued Serrano family representatives, and when he spoke his voice carried absolute authority. "Raphael Serrano is dead. His family attempted to cheat during sacred combat. Their honor is forfeit, their territories are dissolved, and any Serrano who remains in Chicago past sunrise tomorrow will be treated as an enemy combatant. The assembled crowd shifted, murmured, but no one argued. Eric continued, his arms still wrapped possessively around my waist. And let it be known across all families, all territories, all of Chicago's underworld, Linda Verga is under my protection. She is the woman I kill for. The woman I fight for. The woman who saved my life tonight. Anyone who threatens her, approaches her, or even looks at her with anything less than absolute respect will answer to me personally. The declaration was public, binding, the kind of claim that couldn't be taken back or misunderstood. Linda Verga belonged to Eric DeLuca. And everyone needed to know it. One of the council elders stepped forward, an ancient man whose opinion carried weight across all families. The council recognizes Eric DeLuca's claim. Linda Verga is declared family, protected under the old laws, untouchable by rival organizations. This is witnessed and binding. The formality of it should have felt strange, archaic, but instead it just felt like safety, like Eric had just built a wall around me that no one would dare breach. My legs gave out then, the adrenaline finally crashing, leaving nothing but exhaustion and shock and the delayed processing of everything that had happened in the last few hours. Eric caught me before I hit the ground, lifting me into his arms despite his injuries, despite the blood and the exhaustion, holding me against his chest like I weighed nothing. "I've got you," he murmured against my hair. "I've got you, Linda. You're safe now. It's over." I pressed my face against his neck, breathing in bergamot and blood and the scent that meant safety, that meant home, and let myself believe him. It was finally over. 2 weeks later, I stood outside Eric's private office at 6:45 a.m., my badge in hand, trying to work up the courage to walk inside and do what needed to be done. Mateo was recovering well. He'd been released from the hospital 3 days ago and was staying in a secure apartment Eric owned, guarded and protected and finally safe. The Serrano family had dissolved completely, their territories absorbed or redistributed, their leadership scattered to cities where Eric's influence couldn't reach. Chicago had returned to its normal level of dangerous equilibrium. Everything was resolved. Which meant I had no reason to stay. I'd been thinking about it for days, lying awake in the guest room of Eric's penthouse where he'd insisted I stay, watching him move through his space with careful stiffness while his wounds healed, seeing the way his eyes followed me constantly like he was afraid I'd disappear if he looked away. We hadn't talked about what came next. About what his public claim meant. About whether I was still his secretary or something else entirely. About whether staying in his world would eventually get me or Mateo killed despite Eric's protection. I took a breath, squared my shoulders, and walked into his office. Eric was already at his desk despite the early hour, reading something on his computer, his white dress shirt rolled to his elbows revealing the tattoos I'd memorized, his hair slightly mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked up when I entered, and the smile that crossed his face was warm, genuine, unguarded in a way he never was around anyone else. "Linda. You're early." His eyes dropped to the badge in my hand, and the smile froze. "What are you doing?" "I need to," the words stuck in my throat. "Eric, I can't keep working here." The temperature in the room plummeted. Eric stood slowly, carefully, moving around his desk with predatory focus. "Can't or won't?" "Both." "Neither." I forced myself to meet his eyes. "Everything that happened with the Serranos, Mateo being taken, you almost dying, me having to kill someone, that happened because I work for you. Because being close to you makes me a target, makes my family targets, and I won't risk that happening again. So you're leaving." His voice was flat. "Running away. I'm trying to keep the people I love safe." The words burst out. "Including you, Eric. Raphael saw me as your weakness, and he was right. The next enemy will see the same thing, will try to use me the same way, and eventually someone will succeed. Let them try. Eric crossed the space between us in 2 strides, backing me against the door. Let every rival family in Chicago come for you. Let them send their soldiers and their threats and their schemes. I will burn them all down, Linda. Every single one. Because you're not my weakness. His hands came up to frame my face, forcing me to look at him. You're my reason. Eric. No. The word was absolute command. You don't get to make decisions about us based on fear. You don't get to walk away because you're scared of what might happen. And you definitely don't get to quit. I'm trying to protect you. By leaving. By taking away the only person who makes me want to be something other than a monster. His voice cracked slightly. That's not protection, Linda. That's abandonment. Outside the office, I could hear the staff arriving, the normal morning sounds of the organization waking up, people greeting each other, computers starting, the everyday business of running Eric's empire. They would all hear this conversation. Everyone would know I'd tried to leave. I'm afraid, I whispered. I'm afraid of how much I need you. Of what I've become by staying in your world. Of looking in the mirror and seeing someone who killed a man and didn't even hesitate. You saved my life. Eric's thumb traced my lower lip. You killed a man who was about to murder me, and I will be grateful for that every single day for the rest of my existence. You didn't become a monster, Linda. You became mine. The possessiveness should have been alarming. Should have sent me running. Instead, it just made me feel safe. You won't quit, Linda. Eric's voice carried across the now silent office, cold enough to freeze the entire building. Not from me. Not from this. Not ever. Do you understand? Every employee outside had stopped working, stopped moving, stopped breathing, waiting to see how this confrontation would resolve. I'm afraid of how much I need you, I confessed again, softer this time. Eric's expression transformed, from possessive fury to something tender and devastating. Good. Because you belong here. With me. Not as my secretary. Not as my employee. But as the woman I kill for. The woman I fight for. The woman I love. Then he kissed me. Right there against his office door, with his entire staff listening, he kissed me like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning, like I was the only thing anchoring him to humanity, like he'd never let me go even if I begged. And God help me, I kissed him back. When we finally broke apart, Eric turned to address the frozen office, his arm wrapped possessively around my waist. Effective immediately, Linda Verga is my partner. Not my secretary. Not my employee. My partner in every sense that matters. Anyone who has a problem with that can leave. Anyone who threatens her will die. Anyone who even looks at her wrong will wish they'd died. Are we clear? Silence. Then Luca's voice, amused, Crystal, boss. Eric looked down at me, his expression softer than I'd ever seen. Still want to quit? I thought about Mateo, safe and healing. About the gun I now carried everywhere, the one that had saved Eric's life. About 3 years of professional distance that had never quite felt professional, of forbidden longing finally given permission to exist, of a man who'd literally fought to the death to keep me safe. No. The answer was simple, certain. I don't want to quit. Good. Eric pressed his forehead against mine. Because you're mine, Linda Verga. And I'm never letting you go. Outside, the office stayed frozen for another long moment before someone, probably Luca, started a slow clap that the entire staff joined, and I realized with startling clarity that Eric hadn't just claimed me in front of his enemies. He'd claimed me in front of his family. And everyone understood the message. Eric DeLuca's secretary had stopped being an employee the moment she'd walked into his office 3 years ago. She'd always been his. She just hadn't known it yet. Comment below where you're watching from and tell me, did Linda make the right choice staying with Eric, or is she walking deeper into a world that will eventually destroy them both?